America is disintegrating at home. Video footage obtained from multiple U.S. cities shows ICE agents and Border Patrol forces using America has gone rogue, a landmark trade agreement with China. This is not strategy, this is madness. The United States is threatening for war with the United States. Good evening. I'm here to tell you about the moment when America's closest allies stopped trusting us and started preparing to defend themselves from us. The greatest empire in history doesn't fall to foreign invasion. They fall because they self-destruct. And on January 16th, 2026, as Donald Trump threatened to invade Greenland and slap 25% tariffs on America's closest allies, 5 European nations deployed military forces to the Arctic, not to fight Russia, but to prepare for war with the United States. Let that sink in. NATO allies, democratic nations, America's partners for 80 years, now running joint military exercises in Greenland to defend against potential American aggression.
Then I would tariff Denmark at a very high level.
Meanwhile, as Trump obsesses over a frozen island nobody wants, Canada just signed a $1 trillion trade deal with China. European nations are abandoning American leadership, and 50% of American children cannot read at grade level. This is not strategy. This is civilizational collapse wrapped in the American flag. Greenland threat triggered a European military response unprecedented in modern history. How America is losing the global trade war while chasing military fantasies, and how the nation that once led the free world is now seen by its own former ambassador as the most unreliable ally on earth. Let's start with the moment that shattered 80 years of transatlantic alliance. On January 14th, 2026, Donald Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, confirmed what many feared but few believed.
Is advantageous for America's national security. The president has been very open and clear with all of you and with the world that he views it in the best interest of the United States to deter Russian and Chinese aggression in the Arctic region.
The administration has established a working group to negotiate the purchase of Greenland from Denmark. Not a joke, not a negotiating tactic, an actual policy initiative to acquire sovereign territory from a NATO ally. But here's where it gets insane. When Denmark politely but firmly declined, explaining that Greenland's future is determined by Greenlanders and the Danish kingdom, Trump responded by threatening 25% tariffs on any nation that doesn't support American ownership of the island. Read that again. The President of the United States is threatening to economically punish allies for refusing to sell him their territory. This is not deal-making. This is colonial extortion. And Europe is responding accordingly. According to military analysts tracking Arctic deployments and reports from Scandinavian defense ministries, Germany, France, Norway, the United Kingdom, and Sweden have begun joint military exercises in Greenland specifically designed to prepare for potential American military intervention. These are not routine NATO drills. These are defensive preparations against the United States. Norwegian defense officials, speaking anonymously to European press, reportedly described the exercises as contingency planning for scenarios where traditional alliances no longer apply. Translation, preparing for the possibility that America has gone rogue. Think about what this means. For the first time since World War II, European militaries are training to defend against American forces, not as a theoretical exercise, as an operational necessity based on the credible threat posed by the U.S. president's stated intentions. Danish politicians have been blunt in their condemnation.
Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, f*** off.
According to statements reported in Scandinavian media, multiple members of the Danish parliament have called Trump's approach unhinged, neo-colonial, and a fundamental betrayal of democratic principles. One Danish MP reportedly stated the future of Greenland will be decided by Greenlanders and the Kingdom of Denmark. It will not be decided by American threats, tariffs, or military pressure. If Trump thinks he can bully sovereign nations into surrendering territory, he has fundamentally misunderstood what the post-war order stands for. But the most devastating response came from France. French President Emmanuel Macron once a cautious diplomat who tried to maintain bridges with Trump, has undergone a transformation that signals how profoundly Trump has damaged American credibility. In a speech delivered to the French National Assembly on January 15th, Macron reportedly used language that would have been unthinkable from a French leader addressing America just 2 years ago.
Pour rester libre, il faut être craint. Pour être craint, il faut être puissant.
Europe can no longer rely on American protection or American stability. We must make ourselves feared, not just respected. We must have the capacity to defend our interests, our territories, and our allies without American permission or American interference. Make ourselves feared. Those are not the words of an ally. Those are the words of a rival preparing for confrontation. And Macron backed those words with money. According to the French defense budget announcement, France will increase military spending to 64 billion by 2027, a massive expansion explicitly justified by the need to maintain European independence from American influence. This is not theoretical posturing. This is rearmament. And the target is not Russia or China. It is the unreliability of the United States. European defense analysts are calling this the most significant strategic realignment since the Cold War. Not because Europe fears Russian aggression, but because they can no longer trust American leadership. But here's what makes this even more catastrophic. While Trump wastes diplomatic capital threatening Greenland, America is hemorrhaging actual economic influence at a pace that would shock most Americans if they understood what was happening. On January 10th, 2026, Canadian Prime Minister reportedly finalized a landmark trade agreement with China valued at approximately $1 trillion over 10 years, primarily focused on importing Chinese electric vehicles and green energy technology into the Canadian market. Let that number sink in. $1 trillion. That's not a trade deal. That's a strategic realignment of the North American economy away from the United States. And it gets worse. This deal directly undermines American automakers who have spent decades building supply chains integrated with Canada. Chinese EVs flooding the Canadian market will devastate American manufacturing competitiveness. But Canada didn't make this deal because they love China. They made it because they no longer trust America. According to sources familiar with the negotiations cited in Canadian business press, Canadian officials explicitly cited concerns about Trump's tariff threats and trade unpredictability as reasons for diversifying away from U.S. economic dependence. Translation: Trump's threats are not bringing manufacturing back to America. They are driving allies into China's arms. And Canada's not alone. Perhaps the most damning indictment of Trump's foreign policy came not from a political opponent, but from Rahm Emanuel, former Chicago mayor, Obama chief of staff, and until recently, U.S. ambassador to Japan. In a media interview that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, Emanuel delivered what analysts are calling the most brutal critique of American credibility ever voiced by a former ambassador. The United States has become the most unreliable ally on earth. While we threaten invasions for oil and obsess over frozen rocks, China and Europe are signing the trade deals that will define the 21st century. We are not losing because we're weak. We are losing because we are erratic, aggressive, and delusional. Emanuel didn't stop there. According to the interview transcript, he continued, look at Latin America. While Trump talks about invading Venezuela for oil, China has signed infrastructure deals worth hundreds of billions across South America. Europe is negotiating free trade agreements. And we are offering what? Military threats and tariff wars. This is not strategy. This is madness. Coming from a former ambassador, this is not partisan criticism. This is a professional assessment from someone who represented American interests abroad and watched them collapse under Trump's leadership. Emanuel specifically pointed to the disconnect between Trump's fixation on military posturing and the actual mechanisms of global power in the 21st century: trade, technology, infrastructure investment, and diplomatic reliability. Putin is weak, Emanuel reportedly said. 4 years of war in Ukraine have destroyed Russia's military credibility, tanked its economy, and isolated it diplomatically. But Trump looks at Russia and sees strength because he doesn't understand that parades and nuclear threats are not the same as actual power. Real power is building relationships, honoring commitments, and creating economic interdependence. China understands this. Europe understands this. Apparently, we do not. This is a former U.S. ambassador saying out loud what diplomats worldwide are thinking privately. America under Trump is not a leader. It is a liability. But while Trump chases imperial fantasies in the Arctic, America is disintegrating at home. Video footage obtained from multiple U.S. cities shows ICE agents and Border Patrol forces using tear gas, batons, and aggressive tactics against protesters in major urban centers, including cities with no proximity to international borders. This is not border enforcement. This is domestic military deployment against American citizens. According to Rahm Emanuel's scathing assessment, this administration is creating chaos not to solve problems, but to create political theater. They are not enforcing immigration law. They are performing authoritarianism. And the chaos is deliberate because when people are focused on fear, they don't notice that 50% of American children cannot read at grade level. 50%! Half of America's children are functionally illiterate in basic reading and math skills. This is not a statistic. This is a civilizational emergency. Emanuel pointed to what he called the Mississippi miracle as proof that the problem is solvable with investment and political will. Mississippi, historically one of the lowest performing education states, dramatically improved literacy rates through sustained investment in early childhood reading programs. We know how to fix this. Emanuel reportedly said, but instead of replicating Mississippi's success nationwide, we are threatening to invade Greenland. Our priorities are not just wrong, they are insane. And education is not the only crisis being ignored. According to labor market analysis, the United States currently has shortages exceeding 200,000 positions in skilled trades: electricians, carpenters, machinists, HVAC technicians, engineers. Jobs that pay over $100,000 annually and cannot be outsourced. These are the jobs that build infrastructure, maintain power grids, construct housing, and sustain industrial capacity. And America cannot fill them because the education system has failed to train workers for the economy that actually exists. But Trump's priority is not vocational training or infrastructure investment. It is threatening Denmark. Emanuel also addressed Trump's recent threats regarding Venezuela, where the administration has suggested military intervention to secure oil resources. While we threaten military action for oil, Emanuel said, China is signing energy deals with Venezuela, Brazil, and Argentina. Europe is negotiating trade partnerships, and we wonder why Latin America increasingly sees China as a more reliable partner than the United States. This is the fundamental delusion of Trump's foreign policy, the belief that military threats and aggressive posturing translate to global influence. They don't. Not anymore. Because in the 21st century, power is not measured by aircraft carriers. It is measured by trade agreements, technology partnerships, and economic interdependence. China understands this, Europe is learning it, and America is being left behind while chasing 20th century fantasies of territorial conquest. So where does this lead? Let me lay out the scenarios, because what happens in Greenland over the next months could define whether America remains a superpower or becomes a rogue state isolated from its traditional allies. Scenario 1, diplomatic collapse. Trump continues threatening tariffs and military posturing. Denmark refuses to negotiate. European nations formalize military cooperation in the Arctic, explicitly excluding the United States. NATO fractures, not because of Russian aggression, but because of American unreliability. Scenario 2, economic retaliation. Europe, Canada, and other allies respond to Trump's tariff threats with coordinated counter, tariffs targeting American exports. A trade war erupts, not with China, but with America's closest democratic partners. The global economy destabilizes, and the dollar's reserve currency status begins eroding. Scenario 3, military escalation. Trump, facing domestic political pressure and seeking a distraction, orders a limited military operation in Greenland framed as protecting American interests. European forces respond. NATO invokes collective defense, not against Russia, but against the United States. The unthinkable becomes reality. Which scenario is most likely? None of them are good. All of them are possible. And that possibility alone has already damaged American credibility beyond repair. My friends, let's confront the reality that most Americans are not ready to accept. The United States is not losing its global leadership because of external enemies. It is surrendering it through self-incompetence, destructive incompetence. Trump is not making America great again. He is making America unimportant. While he threatens Greenland, China signs trillion-dollar deals. While he imposes tariffs on allies, Europe builds independent military capabilities. While he fantasizes about invasions, 55% of American children are illiterate. This is not strength. This is the final stage of imperial delusion, where a declining power mistakes aggression for influence and mistakes threats for respect. And the world is responding not with fear, but with pity and preparation. European nations are not afraid of America. They are exhausted by it. Allies are not rallying to American leadership. They are building alternatives to it. And the most damning assessment comes not from enemies, but from America's own former ambassador. We have become unreliable. Unreliability is not a negotiating position. It is a death sentence for empires. So what do you think? Is Trump's Greenland obsession a strategic masterstroke that will restore American dominance? Or is it the final proof that America has chosen imperial fantasy over the hard work of actual leadership? The evidence is clear. While Trump chases frozen islands, China is winning the future. While he threatens allies, Europe is preparing to defend itself from us. While he performs strength, America is collapsing from within. That's not greatness. That's the end. And when historians write about how the American century ended, this moment, this Greenland madness, will be remembered not as strategy, but as the symptom of a nation that chose delusion over reality. The question is not whether America can still lead. The question is whether anyone still wants us to